I've always been a big fan of the Gears of War series for their single player campaigns. I've never really been big on the multiplayer in the games. I've just sort of found them shallow and not as much customization or any replay value compared to something like Call of Duty. The campaign in the game takes place a few months after the end of the second game, I think, where basically a lot of the COG and so a lot of the soldiers and civilians are living on boats from now. And the main enemy that you fight in the game is now the Lambent instead of the Locust. The interesting thing is that the game starts out in sort of like a prologue sequence that like depicts the events that happened before the beginning of the first game in terms of explaining how Marcus Phoenix ended up in prison. And basically the main sort of story arc in Gears of War 3 is that Marcus Phoenix is looking for his father, and his father is like secretly working for the Locust, and he's being held prisoner, and their main objective is to try and find him. They added a couple new characters here, but some of them I didn't really care about. They added some woman who tries to constantly outsmart Baird, and she's probably my favorite addition. They added another Carmine who's a lot tougher than the last two. I like him. But then they added this other guy named Jace who almost kind of looks like Ludacris. And I just didn't really find his character all that interesting. He was just sort of boring. So in that case, I just kind of felt like the addition of him in the game was a bit unnecessary. I like the story in this game. There's some really good voice acting and some really good moments and stuff, but I just sort of felt like the set pieces weren't as interesting as the previous games, and too much of the game sort of felt like filler, like there wasn't enough plot progression, particularly in Acts 2 and 4. Now, in terms of the graphics and stuff, I think the game is easily one of the best looking games on the Xbox 360 to date that I've played. The environments all look stellar. There is some minor clipping here and there, but it's barely noticeable at all. I like the art direction. I do like the set pieces, though I don't think they're quite as interesting compared to the previous games. And like I said before, the voice acting is definitely good, and that helped the story, and the sound effects and everything are all great. In terms of the gameplay, everything's basically the same. It's still a third-person shooter, cover-based. You have to constantly take cover, move from cover to cover to shoot your enemies, wait for them to pop their heads out, and ultimately take them down. The interesting thing here is that most of the enemies you face aren't the Locust, they're the Lambent, like I said before. And basically, you use a bit of different tactics to take them down. Usually, a lot of them appear from these stalks that come out of the ground. And there's these pods on the stalks that you have to shoot in order for them to stop infinitely respawning out of them. I noticed that they kind of capped the ammo capacity on the Lancer a bit because it's only about 420 bullets now, and it was like a good 600 and something in the previous two games. My only real problem with this is that the Lambent tend to take a lot more damage to them, especially since you have to shoot the stalks and stuff. So it became a bit of an unnecessary hassle to sort of fight them, so it became a bit monotonous. This also becomes a slight issue when you're playing the game in co-op, because I'm pretty sure they don't upscale the amount of ammo crates or ammo boxes that you find, so you're constantly going to be having to make every shot count, and I just kind of find that a little bit more annoying than it should be. They added a couple new weapons, most of which I didn't really bother using most of the time. One of them is called the Digger, which basically shoots under cover and explodes like on the other side of the cover. I guess it's kind of useful, but I never really bothered using it most of the time. And I remember there's this other thing called the One Shot, which is kind of like I don't know, and you prop it up against a piece of cover and then it instantly kills someone if you shoot it properly. And then there's also like this mauler, like those things those big mauler guys use, like those swords. You actually get to use those, and that's pretty cool. There are also individual weapon executions, so the executions don't really get all that repetitive now. Also, they changed the execution button from X to Y now, so they altered the control scheme up a bit. I kind of found this change to be a bit unnecessary. I mean, it didn't really affect the game in a negative way, but I just kind of wonder why they bothered changing it, because it worked fine in the previous two games. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed the game's campaign mode. I just found it a blast to play by myself and with friends in cooperative gameplay. But it wasn't quite as good as Gears of War 2's campaign in my opinion, because the set pieces weren't quite as interesting. The art style for me was just a bit too bright in most areas. Like, you have like this desert area and stuff like that. It just sort of felt like, to me, that didn't fit in with the Gears of War universe as well as it could have. In terms of the multiplayer, it has become a bit more mainstream, but it generally remains the same. It does require a lot of skill, but it's definitely not my favorite multiplayer. I mean, in fact, I just think, for me, like, my only real multiplayer games that I play are Halo and Call of Duty. I mean, I just don't like the third-person sort of multiplayer games at all. I just feel like, especially in this game, it's too much of a shotgun affair. Most of the game modes have returned. They've added team deathmatch now, and instead of just people killing to like get more points to like reach the highest point, it sort of goes downwards. So each team starts off with like 15 spawns, I believe, and then the more people die, the less respawns the team has until the whole team has been wiped out, and then whoever's still standing wins the game. So I thought that was kind of interesting. There are also a lot of different playable characters that you unlock as you rank up, so that's kind of cool. And there's also some like camouflage on your guns, like gold guns and stuff like that, so that's cool in terms of adding a layer of customization that the previous Gears games didn't have. Horde mode's back, and this time they've added sort of like more strategy, more of like a currency system to the game. Basically, after every 10 waves, there's a boss wave, whether that be like a Brumach or a bunch of Reapers, I don't know what the hell you call them. And then basically you get to like purchase like barriers and stuff like that in order to like defend against the incoming Locust attacks. I kind of like this idea, but it feels too much like Call of Duty's Nazi Zombies, which I was never really a big fan of. Just feels like it limits your space to like operate if you're just like you're purposely holding yourself up. I just feel like creating barriers like that sort of like limits your opportunity to move around by just like isolating yourself inside in one area. They've also added a new mode called Beast Mode, and basically this is sort of like an inversed version of Horde Mode. Instead, you're basically controlling a lot of the Locust characters, and you're basically trying to kill off these humans in a limited time period, like 1 minute for each round. And basically the more points you earn, like the higher class Locust you unlock, and then you eventually unlock really big Locust like the Centipede and like the Berserker. I found this mode really interesting, like in terms of the ideas that it has, but it just felt like it was too bare bones. Like it doesn't really have a whole lot of depth. I found it kind of annoying, like since a lot of the humans put up these stupid barricades, like most of your Locust guys can't really get through it, and it just kind of gets annoying to reach the humans in time. Also, the Locusts that are actually fun to play, like the Berserkers or whatever, you're basically only going to unlock them at the end of like the 12 waves, and you only really get to play as them once, and it takes like 15 minutes of your time to like get all the way up there. So I just kind of felt that's really annoying. And I just kind of felt that, like I said before, that the mode is a bit bare bones. I mean, it has good ideas, but it should have been like added upon and added more depth to. Anyway, overall, I definitely loved Gears of War 3. I thought it was a truly fantastic game on almost all fronts. I mean, it was lacking in some minor aspects, but this is easily one of the best games that I've played all year. It's like so polished at this point, the game mechanics, and the campaign's really fun. The multiplayer does require a bit of skill, and it's not my favorite, but I still enjoyed it a little bit. The cooperative modes are fun to play through, even though some of them have a little bit of flaws to them. But overall, I highly recommend that you get Gears of War 3 if you haven't already. It's really a fantastic game, especially if you've liked the previous two games.
Cover, Delta! Damn drumpy tickers! What the hell's he thinking? Run!
Hey, I thought you'd enjoy the witty irony of Grub on Glowing Island.
Yeah, fucking hilarious! You're gonna blow up the whole ship, genius!